right, you guys, let's see if we can finish this book. We're so close, so bear with me. It might be a little long, but we'll get through it. On the second morning, Mrs. Quimby took a dress out of Ramona's closet without a word. Ramona spoke. "I'm not going to school," she said. "Ramona, aren't you ever going back to kindergarten?" Mrs. Quimby asked wearily. "Yes," said Ramona. Mrs. Quimby smiled. "Good, let's make it today." Ramona reached for her play clothes. "No, I'm going to stay away until Miss Benny forgets all about me, and then when I go back, she'll think I'm somebody else." Mrs. Quimby sighed and shook her head. "Ramona, Miss Benny is not going to forget about you." "Yes, she will," insisted Ramona. "She will if I stay away long enough." Some older children on the way to school shouted, "Drop out!" as they passed the Quimby's house. The day was a long, long one for Ramona. She drew some more seat work for herself, and afterward there was nothing to do but wander around the house, poking her tongue in the hole where her tooth was, while she kept her lips shut tight. That evening her father said, "I miss my little girl's smiles." Ramona managed a tight lip smile that did not show the gap in her teeth. Later she heard her father say something to her mother about, "This nonsense has gone on long enough," and her mother answered with something about, "Ramona has to make up her own mind that she wants to behave herself." Ramona despaired. Nobody understood. She wanted to behave herself, except when banging her heels on the bedroom wall. She had always wanted to behave herself. Why couldn't people understand how she felt? She had only touched Susan's hair in the first place because it was so beautiful. And the last time, well, Susan had been bossy, so she deserved to have her hair pulled. Ramona soon discovered that the other children in the neighborhood were fascinated by her predicament. "How come you get to stay out of school?" they asked. "Miss Benny doesn't want me," Ramona answered. "Did you have fun in kindergarten today?" Mary Jane asked each day, pretending she did not know Ramona stayed home. Ramona was not fooled for an instant. Henry Huggins was the one, quite unintentionally, who really frightened Ramona. One afternoon, when she was pedaling her lopsided two-wheeled tricycle up and down in front of the house, Henry came riding down the street, delivering the Journal. He paused with one foot on the curb in front of the Quimby's house while he rolled a paper. "Hi," said Henry. "That's quite a trike you're riding." "This isn't a trike," said Ramona with dignity. "This is my two-wheeler." Henry grinned and threw the paper into the Quimby's front steps. "How come that truant officer doesn't make you go to school?" he asked. "What's a truant officer?" asked Ramona. "A man who gets after kids who don't go to school," was Henry's careless answer as he pedaled on down the street. A truant officer? Ramona decided must be something like a dog catcher who sometimes came to Glenwood School when there were too many dogs on the playground. He tried to lasso the dogs, and once when he did manage to catch an elderly overweight basset hound, he shut the dog in the back of his truck and drove away with it. Ramona did not want any truant officer to catch her and drive away with her, so she put her lopsided two-wheeled tricycle into the garage and went into the house and stayed there, looking out from behind the curtains at the other children and poking her tongue into the space where her tooth used to be. "Ramona, why do you keep making such weird faces?" asked Mrs. Quimby in that tired voice. Ramona took her tongue out of the space. "I'm not making any weird faces," she said. Pretty soon her grown-up tooth would come in without the tooth fairy paying a visit, and no one would ever know that she had lost a tooth. She wondered what Miss Benny had done with her tooth. Thrown it away, most likely. The next morning, Ramona continued to draw rows of 3 pictures, circle 2, and cross 1 out. But the morning was long and lonely. Ramona was so lonely, she even considered going back to kindergarten. But then she thought about Miss Benny, who did not like her anymore, and who might not be glad to see her. She decided she would have to wait much, much longer for Miss Benny to forget her. When do you think Miss Benny will forget me?" Ramona asked her mother. Mrs. Quimby kissed the top of Ramona's head. "I doubt if she will ever forget you," she said. "Not ever, not as long as she lives." The situation was hopeless. That noon, Ramona was not hungry at all when she sat down to soup, a sandwich, and some carrot sticks. She bit into the carrot stick, but somehow chewing it took a long time. She stopped chewing altogether. She heard the doorbell chime. Her heart began to thump. Maybe the truant officer had finally come to get her and carry her off in the back of his truck. Maybe she would run and hide. "Why, Howie," Ramona heard her mother say, feeling that she had had a close call. She went on chewing away at that carrot stick. She was safe. It was only Howie. "Come on in, Howie," said Mrs. Quimby. "Ramona is having her lunch. Would you like to stay for some soup and a sandwich? I can phone your mother and ask if that's all right." Ramona hoped Howie would stay. She was so lonely. "I just brought Ramona a letter." Ramona jumped up from the table. "A letter? For me? Who's it from?" Here was the most interesting thing that had happened in days. "I don't know," said Howie. "Miss Benny just told me to give it to you." Ramona snatched the envelope from Howie, and sure enough, there was Ramona printed on the envelope. "Let me read it to you," said Mrs. Quimby. "It's my letter," said Ramona, and tore it open. When she pulled out the letter, two things caught her eye at once. Her tooth, which was taped to the front of the paper, and on the first line, Ramona could read all the letters began, "Dear Ramona Q," with like the cat whiskers. Remember how we drew that one time? "Mama!" cried Ramona, filled with joy. Miss Benny had not thrown away her tooth, and Miss Benny had drawn her ears and whiskers on her Q. The teacher liked the way Ramona made Q, so she must like Ramona too. There was hope after all. "Why, Ramona," Mrs. Quimby was astonished. "You've lost a tooth. When did that happen?" "At school," said Ramona, "and here it is." She waved the letter at her mother, and then she studied it carefully because she wanted so much to be able to read Miss Benny's words herself. It says, "Dear Ramona Q, here is your tooth. I hope the tooth fairy brings you $1. I miss you and want you to come back to school and come back to kindergarten. Love and kisses, Miss Benny." Mrs. Quimby smiled and held out her hand. "Why don't you let me read the letter?" Ramona handed the letter over. Maybe the words did not say exactly what she had pretended to read, but she was sure that they had the same meaning. "Dear Ramona Q," began Mrs. Quimby, and she remarked, "Why, she makes her Q the same way you do, Ramona." "Go on, Mama," urged Ramona, eager to hear what the letter really said. Mrs. Quimby read, "I am sorry I forgot to give you your tooth, but I am sure the tooth fairy will understand. When are you coming back to kindergarten?" Ramona did not care if the tooth fairy understood or not. Miss Benny understood, and nothing else mattered. "Tomorrow, Mama," she cried. "I'm going to kindergarten tomorrow." "Good girl," said Mrs. Quimby, and hugged Ramona. "She can't," said matter-of-fact Howie. "Tomorrow is Saturday." Ramona gave Howie a look of pity, but she said, "Please stay for lunch, Howie. It isn't tuna fish, it's peanut butter and jelly." I'll show you this picture. That's the last page in Ramona the Pest. We finished this whole book, you guys. That's pretty awesome. Think about all the things we went through while we read this book. When we started this book, we were at school. Everything was normal. When we finished this book, we were at home watching this book through a screen. So weird. But we're doing it. We're doing awesome, you guys. Since that book is over, I will start reading some other short stories for you. I picked some up from our classroom a few weeks ago, and I'm excited to read them. So thank you for sticking around, you guys.